Welcome to Proles at the Round Table.
Hello, and welcome to Proles of the Round Table, where we sit down, have a few drinks, and talk Marxist history. Check out our website at prolespod.com, where you can find our back catalog, links to all the resources we talk about, and a communist ebook library, along with some recipes. If you want to extra support us, check out our Patreon, where you can give your hard-earned wages to a bunch of tankies in exchange for bonus episodes, clothes, and content. Find out more at patreon.com/prolespod. All right, so we wanted to thank this episode's primary sponsor, who enabled us to buy branded merchandise and sell it, thereby turning ourselves into petit bourgeois in the literal sense. Big thanks to our sponsor, United Fruit Company. God. Also, to stop the angry tweets, we don't actually
God damn it, these fucking people.
Okay, so today we have...
We don't make any money. We make no money.
All right, so today we have Nick with us. Thanks for coming on. How are you doing?
Good.
Cool. So justify why you're here? No, I'm just kidding. No, so like, what are you gonna be talking to us about?
My bad. Okay, yeah. So basically, I spent a little over 3 months in Havana last spring 2018, from about like February to the beginning of May. The school that I went to for undergrad is one of the oldest abroad programs with Cuba that they've been doing since 1989. So we have a pretty big history there. It's like easy for us to get student visas, etc. So, and then I studied at the Jose Marti Institute in Havana, which is associated with the University of Havana. And that's where all of our like professors and stuff are from. And I lived in the Vedado neighborhood in Havana for the entirety of that time.
Awesome. Well, cool.
So just kind of a like overview of Cuba as it is now.
There's my qualifications.
Yeah.
Bona fides.
So I thought that I would go into, I guess, Cuba's like current trajectory and like, all the stuff that people are wondering about, like, what's in that new constitution? Like, how does their election system work? How do Cubans feel like what you read online versus like if you ask people, how they feel about stuff like from different age groups whatsoever, like, what their opinions are on US-Cuban relations and just kind of like the direction of their country. And then maybe like also some like historical stuff as well.
We do like that here.
Including the special period, and then also the Cuban agricultural revolution, which came about as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe like the emerging biotech industry and some of that stuff, and the medical advances. I don't know.
Nice.
Oh yeah, no, that all sounds great.
I hope I'm not missing anything. I might just be saying that to myself.
You have to cover literally everything that's happening, or else. Yeah.
Well, that shouldn't be too hard. I was there for an extremely long amount of time, to where I got to a point where I think I couldn't have learned more unless I like went to the other side of the island and stayed there for a while.
Nice. And before I forget, so I'm Ethan. You probably have heard me before. I'm drinking some Victoria, which is a Mexican lager.
This is Justin, and I'm drinking 2 molecules of hydrogen for every molecule of oxygen.
And I'm Jeremy. I'm drinking Soulcraft Brewing's Green Chili Ale, which is delightfully spicy.
I don't know. I don't know if I want a spicy beer. All right. So.
Oh yeah, I was gonna present the context for what it is that I'm drinking.
Yeah, go for it. People do that all the time.
This is Cerveza Sol. It's like a usual like piss tasting Mexican beer. And the reason why I have it here today is not because I drink this all the time, but this just happens to be the only thing you can buy in King Soopers that also was available to us constantly in Cuba.
Nice.
Oh, interesting. All right.
Because you can't buy La Cerveza Nacional Cristal here, unfortunately. Bummer. Because of the embargo and
the people's beer.
Precisely.
We could probably
one of the 2 national beers, either heavy or light.
Nice.
We could probably get a pallet of that on Alibaba.
Let's do it. That's what we'll spend our petty bouge cash on.
Here we go. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah. So some of you may know that we did record a previous episode on Cuba with Brett from Revolutionary Left Radio, but
Fuck, I didn't know that.
well, but so we recorded it, and then during the editing process, like the CIA got into the servers
fucked.
and like
Oh.
it was unlistenable.
Utterly
so,
fucked.
So
I was
we
about to
have
say
not,
because I did check. I was like, I can't.
no, so we have not done an episode on Cuba. So this will be our first like Cuba,
which is wild.
centered
That,
It
like
is.
episode 39
That's what,
or something.
that's what I thought too. I was like, there's no way
Yeah.
this couldn't have already
Yeah,
happened. And I was like, oh, what do you know?
We tried.
The
And
CIA is probably gonna fuck with this file too.
nope.
Nope.
Knock on wood. It'll be fine. So like, what's the deal with Cuba? No, like, so what's going on?
Well,
What an intro.
well, yeah. So basically, I mean, I feel like the perspective people have to get is that there's like something that kind of lies between everything that you hear about Cuba. Like there's some people that are like, and I'm not saying most of the stuff that like other leftists tell you about Cuba isn't true.
The
but
truth
I mean,
is somewhere in the center.
yeah. Well, maybe just like some of it people like are a little bit too over enthusiastic and like embellishing the details of it, but I would say that like most of it is fairly accurate. Like most of the stuff about the medical programs is true. Like you, even if you're a tourist, if you go to the hospital there, it's basically free. I mean, I think tourists do have to pay, but it's like something like you pay like $5 or something, like, you know, for pretty much anything. It might even just be like a flat fee. They have like pharmacies basically everywhere that if you're a tourist, you can't go in there, but like citizens use them. Cause I mean, I went in one to like look at it or whatever, and they like told me to leave. But it is like, a fact. And they do have democracy there, of course, but it's not
big if true.
You know, and I mean, it's like some people would probably say that it's like undemocratic, but like one of my teachers there said is like that you don't it's kind of ridiculous for other countries to tell another country like what's democratic or not,
Especially the US.
yeah
Right.
yeah, like for example, like Europeans think that our system's undemocratic, but they
And they'd be right.
They'd be right, yeah.
I mean,
that'd be a valid
yeah.
criticism.
So like basically how that works, like how the new president was elected or whatever, like literally happened while I was there.
Well, yeah, so so talk about that a little bit. So the previous president was obviously...
That would be a good place to start.
Yeah, let's do it.
So basically, yeah, when I got there, Raul Castro was obviously like still president, but it was like, you know, the underlying thing was that was happening, that he was stepping down because it was like the beginning of 2018. So like he said, in 2018, I'm going to step down, even though he's still the head of the party technically. So first, a few months before they have the presidential election, which was in like either April or March, I don't remember, like the beginning of April or the end of March, they have the election that sets up the Chamber of Deputies, which is like their Congress or whatever.
Mhm.
And so basically, you know, they have all these candidates kind of by like regional delegation or whatever, that pretty much everywhere that you walk, you can see like these signs that have the pictures of all the candidates and then like a description of that's like in Spanish. So I can only like sort of read it because my Spanish isn't that good, but like that, you know, tells you like gives you like a background on the candidates. And so they elected those people. And then after that has been assembled, like 2 months later, those people choose the president, which they did. But I can confirm that that's not like made up propaganda, that it's like a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Because like, I mean, I saw my host mom's like paper ballot like on our table at breakfast. So I was like, you know, like I looked at it and took a picture of it and all that shit. And it's
So the citizens elect the deputies, and then the deputies appoint a president?
right.
Okay.
And then they also have like regional level, like they have like the provincial government, and then they have like local city ones. Then they also have like neighborhood like assemblies that don't really like decide big things or whatever, but they're just it's kind of like community centers or whatever.
Sure.
And they have pretty much one of those in like every section of a neighborhood.
Nice.
Do you know how many deputies there are? Like a ballpark estimate?
I don't remember the number, but it's probably like 200 something. maybe
Fact check.
we shouldn't go off of what you can go onto Cuba's Wikipedia page.
I am not going to do that.
And it will tell you. Even though we know Wikipedia is like run by the CIA World Fact Book.
So this website says that there were there's 605 deputies. Does that sound about right?
Oh, well, that makes my estimate sound right. I promise I still kind of know what I'm talking about. 605, that does sound right.
This is interesting. It says that there's an 82.9% turnout
Damn.
for elections, which is
Damn.
awesome.
Yeah, they really do. And one of the ways that the turnout, because like you don't really understand like how that works unless you like go there.
Sure.
It's like, why do 90% of people turn out? And it's basically because like they distribute the ballots to them, so they don't have to like go somewhere and like. I mean, I know they do that.
Stand
here.
in line for 100.
They
years.
do that here in Colorado, but like we're
Not everywhere. Yeah.
where I moved from South Carolina, we have to like go somewhere.
Yeah.
To vote.
Most people like, and I mean, even in a lot of places here in Colorado, you have to go to a polling.
Well,
station.
like Colorado is not unique because I think there's a couple of other states that do it, but everyone can receive a mail-in ballot, and mail-in ballots are counted at the same rate as like people who physically show up and do the like turn in their ballots physically. It's not like other places where you only get a mail-in ballot if you don't live within the state that you're voting in, and then those votes only get counted if there's like a close race. So they basically just yeet those into the fire.
Well, and I think there's probably a high correlation of like, I think there's a big correlation between high voting turnouts and like in places where people actually feel like that's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the
Right.
reasons that the US has like such shit like voting turnouts is because like who gives a fuck?
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Nothing
and,
changes.
like especially the majority of people who don't vote are like poor people, and it's because they
Right.
recognize that it doesn't like fucking affect their
Right.
material interests.
It's not because they didn't get a ballot mailed to their house. Like they
Right.
just don't give a shit.
Yeah, well,
Right.
and then I mean, and then like obviously there are a lot of cases where people are being like disenfranchised, but like
Yeah.
the main thing is that even people who can technically vote just feel disempowered by the whole process. So I just
Right.
wonder.
And it's also kind of an infrastructure thing too, just because like Cuba's political infrastructure is very like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It's like, I mean, like I said, they have those like neighborhood community centers, and those, I mean, you see those like everywhere. You don't even have to walk that far to like find the one wherever you are in Havana. And that's where they bring their ballots. So they kind of have to like walk like 3 blocks to do it. So it's not like they have to get into a car
impressive.
and like drive to the other side of town or something like. And I mean, also the other thing is that this is just like, you know, a really big historical moment for them
Sure.
in these past few years, especially with like the new constitution and stuff. So they've been like overly eager for a while to participate in this process.
So you've mentioned the new constitution a couple of times.
But-
How big of a change, or like how drastic was the change between this constitution and the previous one?
I want to say that it is a drastic change, but it also like confirms a lot of the values of the revolution. So like in some areas there are very drastic changes, but it should be noted that the parts that are very drastic, because they're not only drastic in the sense of like Cuba's history, but a lot of them are like historical firsts kind of in the world. Maybe not. I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but one of the things that I remember specifically that's important to mention is that it specifies a age maximum of, I think it's like 60, but I don't want to be wrong about that because that sounds kind of young. Yeah.
Because the average age of the U.S. senator is 61.
Yeesh.
Yeah, I know. And the wording in that part was that the reason that that's so important is just the way that we have an age minimum to ensure like maturity and like lived experience or whatever. It's also like a way of ruling out like how do I say senility, or I'm trying to say senile, but with idiot.
Senility.
Yeah,
senility.
I know. I just wasn't sure how it was pronounced.
Oh, that's it, yeah.
And then also having a vested interest in the future.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
and then, I mean,
That is
absolutely, it's
valid,
huge
100%
because you
valid.
got these like 90-year-old like fucking senators who
They're
are
not going to live to see the bullshit that they're
Yeah,
putting
exactly.
through.
They're
Like, they don't
billionaires and
care.
they're going to die anyway. So
Exactly. They don't care.
They
And
just
they're
loot the country.
sociopaths, so they don't really care about their grandchildren either.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and their grandchildren are probably going to be wealthy
Set
enough
no matter
to
what,
be
yeah.
able to mitigate
In
whatever.
fact, if they can
horrible
push
shit.
To
the
go
right
to
laws
the
through
Elon
to-
Musk colony
yeah.
on Mars.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, okay. Maximum age, that's good. What else you got?
And then
Off to a good start.
a limit of 2 5-year terms for president. Oh, and it is a maximum age of 60. I see the text.
Hell yeah.
Damn. 60. It's
good.
It's not bad at all.
Well done, Cuba.
And I this is kind of like backtracking a little bit, but
That's
it did have a 90% approval rating with 90% of voters as is text. So
Nice.
That's
and
impressive.
as I'm sure everyone's heard, it did affirm a commitment to establishing socialism in Cuba, so that is now worded in the Constitution, because I believe it actually wasn't before.
I'm glad they fixed that.
But I'm not entirely.
What an oversight.
So yeah, so then the
Like, oh shit, we
two,
forgot this, guys. Hold on. We gotta go back.
2 5-year terms for president, and then banning discrimination based on gender, race, ethnic origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And that's like affirmed in the Constitution.
That's nice.
So it's not even statutory.
I thought they were anti-gay.
Restoration of the presumption of innocence.
What's going on with that?
That is all that says. So,
Restoration of the
so
presumption
I
of
think
innocence.
their legal system might have worked a little bit different on that the way before, and I'm not an expert on their legal system, so I do know that they have some heavy sentences for a lot of things. Like my friends told me, like possession of marijuana, it's like 10 to 15 years in prison.
Yeesh.
It's technically better than
But
than a lot
also,
of the US.
but also, it should be mentioned that their penalties for like rape and like violent crime and stuff like that are also extremely high. So Havana is like one of the safest cities in Latin America, because I mean, if you go on vacation anywhere in any country in Latin America, you know, all that they're going to tell you is like how to be careful as a tourist, and
Sure.
like not to get kidnapped, not to get robbed, not to get like raped if you're a girl like walking down the street at night or whatever. And like me and my friends, they were part of my group or whatever, which is mostly women. We walked around Havana by ourselves, like home from clubs and stuff at like 4 a.m. all the time. And it's quiet, and people do not follow you down the street or harass you or anything. I mean, they might try to harass you to try to like get in a taxi or something, but that's just because they want you to pay them. So,
Right.
Right.
Why
So
not hustle?
and then let's see, we're going back to the Constitution. So the right to legal counsel immediately upon arrest, not request. The right to sue the government for damages or negligence, and the right to appear before a judge and report unlawful imprisonment. So not only does this Constitution give basically them pretty much all the civil liberties that are afforded to people in the first world,
Mhm.
but some that are not, because I would say most, and I hope I'm right about this, most developed countries do not have constitutional protections for all those things that I said earlier,
like gender identity and
I mean, I know the U.S. Constitution does not have
right.
constitutional protections for sexuality or gender.
Yeah, I mean, and there's like the Equal Rights Amendment is just hanging out there. Like it's because it can't be ratified because
Wasn't
there's
that
not
that
enough
one
states.
from the 70s that was like,
So the Equal Rights Amendment was basically it gave equal rights for American citizens regardless of sex, which is like the bare fucking minimum possible.
Right.
And it was initially introduced to Congress in December of 1923,
Jesus.
but
Mm.
it did not go up for a vote until 1971.
Very cool, America.
Yeah. And it was approved by the House of Representatives in October of 71. And then in March of 72, it was approved by the Senate. But amendments have to be then ratified by the states. And you have to get, you need 38 states, and it's only got 35. So
Damn, we got
35
that
out of the
many?
50. So
Well, I mean, yeah, but like,
yeah, so there's like 15 states that refuse to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment.
I'm
and so
probably
it's just
from
chilling
one of
there.
them. So
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, America's that's America.
Death to America.
Yeah, no. So like, what was the? Yeah, so I mean, the Constitution was ratified by like this huge majority. Like, what was the? I guess so. In your experience, is there a lot of like civic involvement, like involvement in politics? I mean, I know you're talking about like community centers, like every couple blocks. Like, what are people's understandings of like?
Yes and no. It kind of depends what specifically you're talking about. Like, as far as community involvement is concerned, they're very involved in like the I guess like uplifting and like I don't know, just general maintenance of their communities and stuff like that. Even though like it kind of like peaked during the special period because that was just like a very like the government very much like emphasized community like togetherness during that time period, and like since then, since like situations have improved, it's like kind of lessened a little bit, but it's definitely far like light years ahead of like what the US is like in community involvement, because people aren't like, you know, like afraid of each other and like separated as they are. And
Alienation.
Yeah, and that's the whole like that's the garbage of that idea of the tragedy of the commons.
Yeah,
where the guy who wrote that is like a fucking racist, like borderline fascist asshole.
No shit.
But like his idea was like, when it's my property and it's my things, I take care of it. But when it's the community, people just let it go to shit, you know? Like, but that's because nobody's got a fucking stake in their community and nobody cares about each other. We're atomized so much from each other in the United States and in the West in general.
Right. And that's not to say that like, you know, a lot of Havana isn't like, some people would say like neglected or whatever, but it's not, but it's also something that like, if you ask people, like, are they like upset about this? Like, they're not, you know, like their communities are pretty much for the most part exactly what they want them to be. It's just the only thing that they have a problem with there, as far as like, I don't know, keeping things looking nice or whatever, is they have like a shortage of building materials. So like,
wonder why that is.
Yeah, well, yeah, we know why. And they did talk about that a lot, how they would be doing a lot more of like this and that if they were able to get, you know, certain stuff. And then as far as politics is concerned, they have, it especially depends on who you ask whether or not they're like younger or like older. Like generally older people are like way more enthusiastic about like the revolution in Castro or wherever, and younger people, should not be said that they are against the revolution or anything like that. They're just they're a little bit more critical, I guess, but they are also not like, they don't like love the West as like an alternative or something. I mean, pretty much everyone I talked to, I was like, you know, do you support socialism and like all that stuff? And they just be like, well, you know, we want to like try different things, blah, 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 or like whatever. And like, we want to be able to travel more. That's like pretty much one of the main things that they said.
It's the same shit that the East Germans said.
See this over and over.
Yeah, y'all did talk about that in the East Germany
we want
thing.
blue jeans and we want to be able to travel. And then somebody's like, well, you're going to have capitalism then.
Yeah, well,
and they're like, fuck.
Well, yeah, basically the thing that is said like comma right after all that stuff is like, but we don't want the US like involved in our country again.
Yeah.
We do not want US capitalism. We don't want their system. We don't want to lose, you know, all the stuff that the revolution gave us. We just want to be able, we want the embargo to be over, and we want we want like certain consumer goods that from other countries, and we want to be able to like travel, although their travel rights are not as limited as some people think. Like one of my closest friends in Havana that I still talk to all the time, he like lived in the Dominican Republic for like half of his life, and then like came back to Havana and has been like going back and forth because he has like family there. And I talked to other people that have been to like a shit ton of different countries in Latin America, and have been to the US and have been to Canada, and like
why didn't they stay?
Exactly. Well, some of them, and also a lot of the Cubans that have moved to like Florida and stuff like that. The thing that they never like tell you about, like the other side of that is is not all of them are there like fleeing like the government in Cuba and like never want to go back or whatever. Like literally, I would say at least half of them, if not more than half now, go there just because they want to send money back to their families. And or like they get a bunch of money and then they go back to Havana and like open a restaurant or something. So they don't, a lot of them don't even have a desire to stay in Florida or wherever they go.
Can't blame them.
I mean, yeah, I never had a desire to stay there when I was there either. So
Yeah, Florida fucking sucks.
Garbage ass state.
So,
You're gonna get hate mail for shitting on Florida.
Not at this podcast.
and then
some people who live in Florida are okay.
Sure.
Mostly the ones who listen to this podcast.
not Marco Rubio and that.
Marco Rubio does not listen to this podcast. I guess. So what has been the recent trajectory? Like what's been the last couple of, like, I guess just since like, let's say the last 20 years, like in Cuba.
Maybe the special period going
for
forward.
the special period going, like
Last
what are the main things that are important to know about like what's happening in Cuba and that have shaped like where they're at now?
And I guess like a lot of people may not know what the special period is.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. So let's give a little bit of context for the special period.
Hell yeah.
Okay. So
it's the not so special period. To be honest.
the reason that it's called the special period comes from like specifically a speech that Castro gave about that, where he decided to have an approach to crisis which affected pretty much the entire socialist world during that time period, where like instead of looking at this like it's kind of like an end of days scenario, it's just another difficult period in the course of our 500-year history.
So the crisis
good.
we're referring to is the collapse of the Soviet Union.
So it's a lot more of a dialectical approach.
That's beautiful, actually.
To
I like
the,
it.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
I feel like even a lot of leftists have never heard that.
I have,
Which
no, I haven't.
because like I've said that before, people are like, "Wow, that's really
beautiful,
insightful," and I was like, I thought we should have like talked about that.
Yeah.
Considering how much we talk about other things that happened like 100 years ago in Russia over and over again.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
I mean,
Never
yeah,
heard
but
of it.
like
It's never over.
the DPRK, like the DPRK had like they also refer to the period right after the Soviet Union fell as like, I don't remember what exactly, but it's another sort of thing. Like we have this
like
time period in the 90s that was.
I mean, basically,
kinda rough.
he was saying like that we need that they needed to compare it to their entire history, just because, like, obviously because it was difficult. Even though it was probably one of the most difficult things most of those people had experienced in their lives, it was not anywhere close to the most difficult thing the Cuban people had ever experienced, especially compared to like all the wars while they were with Spain, colonialism itself, like the genocide of the Taínos and
Batista
and the slavery and the revolution, the first revolution with Jose Marti, and then the 60s when the US was like bombing them and doing all this stuff. Which we're not talking about that yet, but
we're moving backwards
because the Cuban people do have some interesting perspectives about that.
I bet they do.
But yeah, so that's like why it's called the special period, and they pretty much, the government kind of like went really hard on that entire thing, but like it wasn't like one of the, and I feel like this is important to mention, one of the things I feel like people get wrong all the time thinking about that is that it was like the Soviet Union fell and then it just like snapped into that reality.
Right.
But it had been something that had gradually been building up since like the beginning of the 80s, like basically since Gorbachev. Like
because funding was
power.
cut.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Gorbachev cut funding, one of his first things, like 1986 or something.
He was doing snake stuff with like from day one.
Fucking young Gorby, man.
But
we gotta watch the Herzog documentary with him.
Oh God.
So it wasn't like they didn't see it coming, but there was an element of surprise just kind of to the moment of thing. But they'd already been going through some shit. And then something that else has to be mentioned, like, okay, so they had food shortages and just shortages in general during that time period, but people were not starving to death.
Right.
That was not a thing that was happening. In fact, there's probably still a great portion of this country that experiences the same, if not more, food insecurity than they did during that time.
Almost
period.
certainly.
Sure.
So basically, they just immediately mobilized everywhere to basically come up with any type of solutions as they can to adapt to that. For the fuel shortage, they encouraged more people to ride bikes, and they promoted it as not only like a necessity, an economic necessity, but like also that, there were benefits to it, that it would make people healthier, as a good cardio or whatever. And there was lots of, you can call it propaganda, of just like, biking it's good for health, etc.
It is.
It is, yeah. Objectively true.
And it was
Leftist propaganda.
Yeah. And then they did at first, there probably was a lot of food rationing. So they made sure that, like some people weren't getting like significantly more food than others.
Right.
But what's more important is kind of what the long-term stuff that came out of that is because they came up with all these kind of inspiring innovations throughout that period, because instead of coming at it with the approach where they were like, we need to do anything to make sure that we get these things as soon as possible by whatever means, they said, well, what can we do to make stuff to replace these things? And obviously, like, eventually the fuel shortage ended as a result of Venezuela, like giving them, after I don't know exactly what year the Bolivarian revolution happened.
It was 97 or 99. It was
I think it's 99.
That kind of
late 90s. Yeah.
That event kind of started to end the special period. So you have to think of the special period as like between basically like between like the late 80s and like the end of the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So about a decade.
So basically they made all these innovations in agriculture. So they basically reformed their entire agriculture system. Because prior to the special period, a lot of the farms were the like kind of state run farms or whatever. And then there was like a small amount of cooperative farms, which like the difference between those two is like one is like it's owned by the state and then people work it and then they get something out of that or whatever. And then like most of the product is just kind of like, distributed. Yeah. And they were figuring out that was inefficient, but they did not respond to it by privatizing the land, but rather they made it cooperatively owned so that because they wanted to give individuals a vested stake in the farming process. But they didn't want there to be like large landowners or anything like that, because they have like a history with that. Or whatever.
We just got rid of this shit.
And so does like all of Latin America. But so basically, so they had these farming cooperatives, and they had these like education programs for the cooperatives that basically like people shared like farming tools and stuff like that. Like they had like communities, and then the programs, they basically like taught people how to farm and stuff like that, and even like some of the new methods or whatever. And those people got to keep a portion of the food for themselves, and they also got to like sell some of it at market too. And then like of course, like some of it had to be like taken to be like distributed or whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah,
the production increased so significantly that they were able to kind of balance those things out. And it was it was extremely popular. And they also started in the urban environment, they started all these urban and gardening communities. And at one point, kind of like during the peak of what you would call the Cuban agricultural revolution, they had 90% of Havana's produce was grown within the city limits.
Yeah. And I think I read something like part of that was mandated, right? Like X amount of whatever is consumed must be grown within a certain distance of that place.
Yes. Because they wanted to maximize the efficiency of land use.
Right.
Yeah.
And also that cuts down
put
on
gardens on top of like all the houses and shit too, right?
And that also cuts down on fuel consumption, because you're not busing, you're not trucking stuff across the island.
So they had those gardening clubs, and that was also the same thing, is that they they would have these like weekly meetings and stuff like that in the community centers where they were distributing brochures and stuff about how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Nice.
So they basically taught everyone how to grow food.
That's awesome.
And they also, even outside of like, the urban areas, they had I even saw this when I was in Havana, as there were just like greenhouses like everywhere. And another thing that they did is they kind of did away with a lot of the sugar part of the economy. So they basically like took a lot of the land that had because during the Soviet period, like even though people think of that as kind of like it was like the golden age of revolutionary Cuba, there were a lot of things that being involved with the Eastern Bloc kept their economy being like a monoculture, because a lot of their trade with the Eastern Bloc was sugar.
Yeah.
And that made it not that much different than what they had with the United States. Not, I mean, no, I'm not saying that like that, but it was
social
right.
imperialism.
It was,
we got you.
It's hard to be economically
they
independent.
did grow less sugar right after the revolution too, but it was still a major part of their economy up until the special period.
Yeah.
So around that time, their economy moved significantly away from sugar. So they that was kind of like the land repurposing thing I was talking about, is they repurposed a lot of sugar land for food to make up for the food shortage, and it worked.
Well, yeah, I mean, because when you're moving away from, because
sugar is also
from commodity, like
sugar is also a very nutrient demanding crop as well, so it's not good
it's
for
tough
the
on the soil, and when you're monocropping, like that's just never but like when that was their exchange for like the other commodity, it just makes sense.
And I hate myself for not specifically remembering the details of this, but like a lot of the agricultural innovations that they did are actually so significant that when I was doing a semester long like agricultural like study at my university, one of the guest speakers that we had that was kind of like, she worked in Washington in some kind of like agricultural, I don't think it was like the Department of Agriculture, but it was like something like that. And it was just how like a lot of Western countries are interested in Cuba's sustainable developments in agriculture, because they didn't develop sustainable agriculture to be sustainable, but it kind of accidentally happened anyways, because one of the reasons they did all this stuff is because they did not have fertilizer, and they didn't have chemicals and all that stuff. So they ended up inventing like, or I don't know if inventing is the right word, because it's like natural, but they discovered ways to solve these problems without using chemicals and stuff like that. Like they like genetically engineered plants that were like resistant to certain parasites.
Nice.
And like these crop rotation kind of programs that they'd like plant like an orchard of these trees that like were, I guess, like kind of soil efficient, and they would raise livestock in these fields at the same time, and then plant other crops like between the rows of the orchard. And so the trees fed the animals, and then the animals fertilized the crops, and then the crops grew. And it was kind of like a cycle of like maintaining the richness of the soil.
That's super interesting. And I mean, they were successful to the point where Cuba's the only carbon like negative country in the world right now.
I think
is that the case?
I don't know if it's the only one,
or it was like
it's close. It's one of a few.
There's like not many, and it was maybe the first one.
But I think what's most important to say in this is kind of what came about leading up to today. Where they are now with food security is now like not only above like a lot of the West, but also pretty much all of Latin America.
Yeah.
Like the average Cuban has like something like a 2,000 to 2,500 daily calorie intake of food, and they all have like massive access to fresh produce and all these things, and it's not like just like in some places where you have to go far to get, it's like everywhere.
Sure.
Because I went to the markets, I went to like the food commissary where like the poorer people like get their food. I don't think all of it's free, but it's like ridiculously cheap. Like you can get like a giant sack of rice for like $5 or like $1 or something. And like when we ate meals, I mean, they were always like so huge, and then like a bunch of different things. Like for breakfast, we had like 5 different kinds of fruit and coffee and like eggs and bacon and all this stuff. I mean, there's no even semblance of food shortage anywhere.
That's awesome.
And it's like that process that they followed with the like agricultural revolution is very similar to the way that they dealt with the 2012 hurricane season, I think it was, where like it was just like hurricane after hurricane after hurricane came through. And so they developed all of these programs where people were taught basically to repair and build their own homes.
Yeah.
Which is a like great way to deal with that. Like rather than trying to pay for construction companies or state run organizations to come in there and do that, they teach the people how to do it and then give them either free or I think it's free if they, I forget how that works. I looked this up a while ago, but it's like it's either extremely discounted or free if they can build it within a certain amount of time or something. I forget that.
While I know some stuff about their like disaster preparedness thing, I'm not like a big expert on it.
Sure.
But like I do know that their like disaster preparedness systems in Cuba are like so advanced and like efficient that it's one of the few things that the US and Cuba actually cooperate with each other on, is that we get a lot of our data about hurricanes like from Cuba. Because unlike, you know, in the US where a lot of our disaster relief is like kind of very post disaster.
Right.
And
because that's how you make the money.
And as someone who's like from Hurricane Alley, I'm like very familiar with how like lazy FEMA is and like all this other shit. So my dad's even like from Louisiana. So like, you know, Katrina was like a really big thing for us. Yeah. But in Cuba, like they start getting ready for hurricanes, like as like the second that they realize that one's about it, even if they're not entirely sure, they start preparing for tropical storms and all these other kinds of things. And I mean, really the only hurricane that was actually bad enough to still for you to still be able to see the effects like years later was Maria. I think it was Maria. I might actually be wrong about that. It might have started with I'm thinking of Puerto Rico. It was the one, maybe it started with like an I or something. All I remember is like they were saying it was so bad. There was like some tree in Havana Vieja that was like had been there since the Spanish had arrived that like broke during that hurricane. So it was like a very significant thing for them, I guess, because I mean the Spanish arrived there like 500 years ago.
Sure.
Maybe that's not exactly. It had been there for a long time. I don't think the tree might have been 500
years old tree. Let's just go with that.
I feel like some environmental scientists might like call me out for that. So like,
excuse me, that tree was only
or a biologist, like whatever.
315 years.
Whatever their degree that they haven't turned to a job yet is called. There's a lot of like misleading things in their economy. Like you have to kind of really like figure some shit out to know how their economy works. Because if you just ask somebody how much they get paid at their job, that is not going to tell you how much money they have.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because for example, if you work at the Cohiba cigar factory that I did a tour of, like you only get paid something like it was between 10 and 20 CUC a month, which is the equivalent of $10 to $20, which I also might add has a lot more value there than a sugar. So you can buy a lot more with that.
Sure.
But also at the same time, that is still not a lot of money. But the other thing that you get paid in there is that they give you something like 10 cigars a shift that you just get to take and they box them up and sell them to tourists for like $60.
Amazing.
So like they don't, their base wage at the factory isn't really that high, but off of selling the cigars that they get from working, they make like hundreds of dollars a month, some of them. Cause I even like bought cigars in a market from like somebody that was selling them. And like, I guarantee he probably made them at the factory.
Sure.
I mean, he basically probably got them for free. That was the only way that he would have sold them to me for $20. So
yeah.
So yeah, like a lot of them have these kind of like side things that are because like, unfortunately, because of a lot of like the limit of hard currency that the government's able to get, people kind of have to have these like side income thing. And that's another one of the parts of the Constitution that kind of opened up private enterprise a little bit, is to kind of allow a larger part of that economy to function. But it's not the same way that you would think about private enterprise in the West. It's not, we're not talking about private enterprise as like one person owning like 1,000 apartments and like charging people rent for them. It's like, it's like somebody having an extra couple of rooms in their house and renting them to tourists, and they make a significant amount of money off of that. Or people selling consumer goods that they make to tourists or just to other people. Farmers still are allowed to keep a large portion of the produce or food that they make, and they can sell it in the markets. In addition to how much they're paid for making the food, they can also like sell it. So, and there's people that like set up like tables and shit and sell lighters and like all kinds of shit like that. So,
Just to clarify, Cuba has two currencies, right?
yes, they do. They have a dual currency system. I did hear from a lot of people that they're like fusing them
Oh,
in
really?
the near future, and they probably have like already done it. But like, it's the CUP and the CUC. The CUP is the Moneda Nacional, which is like their national currency, and it's like 24 to a single dollar. And then the CUC, the convertible currency, is like exactly equal to the value of $1. And the reason there's a specific history to why that exists, because it didn't exist until during the special period, the late special period, because one of the big problems they had during the special period is that the dollar was becoming like a big black market currency thing. And there were all these stores that only accepted dollars, and then it created this like kind of two-tiered economy where it was like Cubans could shop like it. You probably heard about this before, but it's like, Cubans could only go to like certain stores, and then like there are other stores for tourists, and like and they did solve that problem, and it was not an issue while I was there. I mean, you could say that to a light extent it still existed, because it's kind of hard to completely eradicate.
Sure.
But because, I mean, if you have people coming to your country that have, significant larger amounts of money than other people do, then you can't really just like tell them that they can't spend.
Right.
Like,
So the CUC was
was made for them to be able to control dollar-based exchange.
Okay.
So basically, like you can't spend dollars in Cuba. You have to like turn them into that currency. So it's a way that they're able to keep track of that.
Sure.
And basically make sure that it doesn't kind of like stay out of the government's hands. I mean, that might not be the best phrasing, but what I mean is that like a lot of
the government's taking all the dollars.
A lot of their programs are funded by money that they get from tourism. So like without having that as like a background economy,
sure,
functions as basically these programs being underfunded when the money is there. So it's like, so they fixed that problem with the convertible currency. And then they changed, because of how unpopular the two-tiered economy thing was, they changed that to where pretty much everything that caters to tourists in any way whatsoever, whether it be a bar, like a place where you can go to concerts, or like hotels, pools, like different stuff like that, there's a tourist price and there's a Cuban price. Like we went to a music festival while we were there, and the price that we had to pay was 20 CUC, or like $20. And then for Cubans, it was $1.
Nice.
As it should be.
Yeah.
And there were lots of bars that had covers where we had to pay like $5, that they were $1, or like it was like
nice,
or it was like half of a CUC, like 10 CUP or something like that.
Nice.
So basically, like equalizes things.
Yeah, basically.
Cool.
It's awesome.
While not while like both people can enjoy it together.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And
Yeah,
they
great.
still, and the businesses still make the same amount of money as
Right.
well.
Yeah. So what you're talking about with like the private enterprise and stuff, that's really interesting, because I mean, no one will describe, like nobody, even the most like optimistic communist would describe Cuba as like a communist thing. They're in a situation where they've been in a situation where like it's a small island. They don't have the productive, like they don't have those like commanding heights of the economy, like the productive power to be able to.
Yeah,
like,
it's not a like strictly industrialized country.
Right.
Like they're still trying to do that, but like
the problem is the embargo.
something that they stressed excessively whenever I was talking to them is how important foreign direct investment is to them.
Sure.
And that they do want that, but Another thing a lot of people don't know is that they do have foreign direct investment in Cuba. Like you can invest. I mean, I don't think not if you're like a U.S. company, because our not because their government doesn't allow it, because our government doesn't allow you to do that. But basically, how that works legally is that you are allowed to invest up to 49% in an interest in Cuba. Because
so you never have
in
control
enterprise, so you do not have controlling.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. So like there was like this hotel that we went to a lot to like buy like tourist goods, because they had like a gift shop there that had things that you like, you know, things that
Cuba.
Things that we
Jacob for our shirts.
or like or like lighters, because this is one thing that I have to explain. They sold cigarettes almost everywhere, but they did not sell lighters like anywhere. So I was like, how exactly? And like, so if you're ever there and you smoke, if you see somebody selling lighters at like a fold up table, like buy them right. Because otherwise you have to go to like a gift shop to buy them, and then they cost like a stupid amount of money compared to everything else. And then, so basically, this hotel called the Malia Cohiba was 49% owned by the Spanish hotel tourism company Malia, and then like 51% by it's not a Cuban company, but Cohiba is just like a name that you associate. It's like a cultural thing. I don't know.
I guess the reason it's just interesting talking about like with the foreign direct investment, like every socialist country has done that, because like they're not okay. So I feel it's not a closed. The problem is it's not a closed system. Even when you've got like socialism in one country, like the entire purpose of the fucking
God bless.
Yeah, I mean, like shout out to our boy, like the Man of Steel, but like. Like, the NEP, the entire fucking purpose of that was to get foreign money into the Soviet Union, so then they could start, like, they could get the money and the resources in there to build the stuff. So, like, it makes sense.
You mean like what China has been doing since the 80s?
Xi Jinping.
You sound
nothing but respect for my president.
Dangoid.
Oh, jeez.
Capitalist roader.
Well, I'm actually like an infamously like hated Dangoid on Leftbook. So I even like created like if you guys remember that infamous group Comrade Lenin's dank meme stash that was like destroyed by discourse.
I didn't know about this, but I'm not surprised. Leftbook is a cursed place.
I was one of the people that led to the destruction of that group, and then I created this like tanky alternative to it, and then it just ended up turning into a dang group, and it was like. And like all these people that were originally in there that were like Soviet LARPers or whatever, was like, oh, we're all like dingists now, and I was like, yeah. Cool. Also, the Tiananmen Square massacre never happened. So get out of our group, Guayla.
I know that's you, Trotsky.
We uplift ding Maoist. Succession theory here.
When I was like a baby leftist, there was a dude on Leftbook infamous, this guy named I think it was Justin Kahn or Justin Com or something. Anyway, and he was a dengist and like referred to himself as such, not like people called him a dengist,
and
because
you were like, what the fuck?
And I was like, this is stupid. China is state capitalist, whatever.
Whatever the fuck that means.
Because I was a fucking idiot. And he was like, listen, the problem is that you, like a lot of Western leftists, are thinking in terms of like 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10-year goals. He's like, China is on a 100-year trajectory.
Yes,
it's on a 50 to 100-year trajectory, and you can't see that far, and that's your problem. And I was like,
Chinese socialism
is Marxist king.
and that was a turning point for me, because I was like, shit, what if they are?
And
like,
some of this is actually relevant, because Chinese socialism actually is very popular amongst Cuba.
And that one of the things that,
and in Latin America in general, like in Latin American leftists, most of them
China.
They like China, and like kind of, they even kind of back then they saw them as like being a little bit more respectable than the USSR, towards like it's I mean, obviously everybody respects Stalin, but you know, like
Of course.
like Cubans did not like Khrushchev that much at all.
Nor should they have.
They even had this song during the revolution that they sung whenever like Castro first like rebuked him because he like took the nukes out or whatever and called him like a bunch of different shit.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to just finish foreign direct investment just a bit. 'Cause
Okay.
I feel
Yeah, no, if you got more to say about it, go for
like
it.
a lot of leftists, maybe like 90% of them, like I mean, like even though I'm a tanky, like we need to talk about like dogma. 'Cause I mean, well, ancoms are more dogmatic anyway.
Oh boy,
But like,
here we go.
but like, you know, I feel like people are just like
These
way
opinions
too.
do not reflect.
Like, are we not?
But they do not.
I feel like
necessarily-
it's like people don't realize that we're able to like adapt what is and isn't capitalism according to like changing conditions and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So it's like,
Absolutely.
and it'd be
Be
ridiculous to say
dialectical, you
otherwise.
bastards.
Like, how are we going to say religion is poison if we, you know, we make our own religion?
Sure.
You know, so like we need to be scientific in it because it is a science. And that's the thing is like you can make foreign direct investment and you can even adapt to imperialism through a socialist perspective. And that's kind of what they are doing in Cuba is just because like they realize certain realities like, yes, we need hard currency and yes, we need certain countries to invest in our economy. But as long as we keep a control over it so that we're able to keep it within our goals as a revolution, then like, I don't understand other than pure, like being purist or like worrying about where you're going to go after you die. You would not do these things.
But has Cuba abolished the value form?
But I mean, that's the fucking thing. Like we've said this before that like there was no reason for Khrushchev's revisionism.
No, absolutely.
Everything in the Soviet
They
Union
were
was
great.
going great. It was on a great trajectory. There was no reason for that to happen.
He was like, I want to be like America.
Materially, there was no reason for that to happen.
He really
But-
just, I feel like Khrushchev was just really insecure and he wanted people to like adore him. As
I
like,
think he
I
wanted to
don't
be
know.
remember, but yeah.
and it's
Anyway,
kind of hard to follow up, you know. Like,
follow
Yeah,
up to
sure.
Stalin.
But
Yeah.
when Deng did it, it wasn't because it was Deng. Sorry,
Deng.
when Deng did it, it wasn't because of no reason, and arguably it was because of the Sino-Soviet split. But but when these economic reforms took place, there was a legitimate reason for them to happen materially
and
to survive.
because
Well, right.
China has lifted like 700 million people out
Right.
of poverty,
Yeah.
like I would say
Fuck y'all.
it's
Well,
like
and then-
it's like that thing when people say like capitalism has lifted like X amount of people out of poverty in the last like century or whatever. But what they don't tell you is that when you detract China from that, they've actually poverty has increased.
Sure.
That's my favorite thing on Twitter is that people are like, someone will be like,
Just
oh, well,
China.
like China's lifted like hundreds of millions of people out of poverty or whatever. Like they're like, no, well, China's state capitalist, and then it's like you're saying capitalism lifted millions of people out of
You
poverty.
idiots.
Damn,
And
are you a
you, like-
Marxist? Fuck off.
And Nick, you mentioned the fact that like
They've lifted like 2.5 USs out of poverty, but there's billionaires.
Jack Ma's in the party. You know,
But the
there are
key is-
9 million other people in the party.
Yeah.
But the key is that the CPC still has control. Like,
Yeah,
yes, there are
can-
fucking billionaires.
they can revoke all their assets whenever the
Yes.
fuck
Right.
they want.
Well,
Exactly.
And so bringing this back to Cuba, you like it's this idea that this tiny island right next to the biggest
The imperial core.
the imperial core, like literally the heart of
Yes.
darkness in the world, 90 miles away, that they're going to be able to just suddenly like
Yeet
make this
them way.
like exactly where is this stuff coming from? Where are the resources to abolish like
you know,
the
all
value
the all
form
the
and,
coal,
like,
all the
where's that
coal
coming
and
from?
oil in Cuba.
what's going on?
Because a lot of internet communists are idealists, no matter
Yep.
what the fuck they
Yep.
say about
Well,
materialism.
our ideals can like materialize natural resources.
Fuck you.
Like,
Listen, if you read enough theory, then the copper will just like materialize in your warehouses.
it'll manifest. Your good thoughts will manifest. Copper
Listen,
mines on your island.
also,
Idiots.
cars are
I read
imperialist.
Full Metal
anyways.
Communist.
Full Metal Communist. Yeah.
I read.
Just
Listen,
do some like hand signals and like
Yes,
draw on the ground. And,
I prayed to Hoja and 1,000 tons of iron appeared in my
I'm taking
in my
notes.
trucks.
taking notes.
I'll be sure to let them know when next time I go to Havana.
Oh yeah.
Which
Oh,
my
yeah.
friends are always asking me to come back, but I'm just like, my country is not.
Yeah, it's tough now.
My country hates us.
Pearl's
Hard out
Cuba
here.
trip when?
One of the important things to talk about, if I have said any of the issues that Cuba has, is every single time that you think about one of these things, you have to think what is being done in spite of the fact that they are a Caribbean island that is being blockaded by the
Yes.
largest military in
Yes.
the world.
Right.
And somehow, in spite of that, they have able to almost like eliminate infant mortality.
Yeah.
They have completely eliminated mother to child HIV
Fuck.
whatever the word is for
Transmission,
that.
yeah.
Transmission, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I heard they had a lung cancer vaccine they were working
Yeah.
on.
it's actually being, well, as of last year, I need to like check the progress on that. It was being trialed in upstate New York.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, weird. There's actually is some cooperation that they won't tell you about
Because it'll be profitable
because
for
the people that are doing
medical
it actually
businesses.
don't want you to know that they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then they might get like indicted or something.
Yeah.
So I mean,
If they
but
keep it secret, they can make a fuck ton of money.
they
right?
also
In a few years,
they
yeah.
also like eliminated a lot of like diabetes related stuff.
Nice.
They, like I actually lived right next to one of like it's recognized by the UN as like one of the best diabetes institutes in the world, and my host mom actually had either type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and she was given a house in Vedado so that she could be close to the institute.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, but so I guess to kind of tie all this together, like with all the trouble that happened in the 90s and like the restructuring and some of the adaptations they've had to make to survive and thrive, what do you, based on your experience like with the Cuban people that you spoke to, like and just your own study of Cuba, like what
Oh yeah, this part's important.
what does the future look like for them? Like, or like, I not like the long term, but like, what do you see them doing in the next couple of decades? Like, what are their
Well,
plans?
I mean, I think that they have a lot of potential just because of the infrastructure of their system. Like, I think that they're, even compared to a lot of socialist countries, just much more efficiently and quickly able to adapt to certain scenarios. And I think really, and this is coming directly from my professors at the University of Havana, saying is that like pretty much all that they need is just kind of like the catalyst of foreign direct investment to continue doing a lot of things that they're trying to do right now. And basically, I mean, they're right now, a lot of their economy is based off of tourism, and that's something that they're trying to change. And the two things that even like Western countries and China are interested in as a unique Cuban like economic export is their biotech industry, which is now probably the most renowned in the world.
Hell yeah.
They're obviously like the medical advances they have, that's like an export that they can have. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of natural resources.
Well, and that's what we were saying. So like, there's only so much
they
you can do.
but what should be noted is that even like I said, even during the USSR period, like they still were very dependent on cash crops and like
Sure.
and coffee and sugar mainly,
Which is kind of fine because the whole
and like
point is they
now
can trade.
they don't
Right.
they
Now
can't
they
even
can't.
really go back to that anymore because they're just growing food where the sugar used to be.
Right.
So-
you can't not grow the food.
So like their economy in the future isn't going to go back to sugar. Like they're now
Right.
more invested in the biotech and the medical stuff.
But I mean, it sounds like a sort of, they have a very diverse,
Well, a lot
like,
of
modern.
Also, a lot of
technological
doctors go to Cuba to receive medical training
Yeah.
or medical students. And also something that I experienced while I was living there is like in my house, like all these like Mexicans came to stay with us. And one of them, it was like their family wasn't even there. They sent their daughter there to receive treatment in Havana.
Mhm.
I don't remember what for exactly. I think it was like appendicitis.
From Mexico.
Yeah, from Mexico. And that's not
Wait a second.
that's not an isolated case. It's like
I'm sure not.
Why? Why would they do that? Why, from the thriving capitalist economy of Mexico, would they send their daughter to communist Cuba?
well, you know. And that's another thing that's kind of important to mention is even if Cuba has like a long way to go in a lot of areas,
Yeah.
the fact that they are ahead of most, if not all, of Latin America and the Caribbean in all of these things, while what I just mentioned before about being blockaded by the most powerful military in the world is remarkable. And it's to the point where even, places like the EU and like China and stuff like that, like have been coming up with clever ways to bypass the blockade and the sanctions and stuff. Like especially, and I need to leave an honorable mention for the Netherlands, because if you go to Havana, what you're going to see is a lot of Dutch shit. And that's because the Dutch, for some reason, they kind of have a long history of doing this thing where they like, if nobody else can trade with somebody, the Dutch will do that. And
so you can launder goods through.
And basically, I don't know exactly how, but the Dutch have just like basically they like have snuck under pretty much the majority of like U.S. stuff, and I think they have a lot of clout in the EU too, where the U.S. is like, well, you have to pay these fines for like sending this stuff to Cuba, and then the Netherlands is basically like, well,
whatever.
No, not
we
really.
don't actually.
What are you going to do? Invade the Netherlands?
I mean, it's sort of like because
I'm sure they've thought about it.
The issue with
they don't have any oil there.
The issue with like
just tulips and
those sorts of blockades is that a lot of times it's tied to particular like company names.
Right.
So they'll be like, this company, because it is part of this organization, which has a treaty with us, is not allowed to trade with this country. And so like this is a thing that happens between China and the DPRK, is that China has companies which are blocked from being able to do trade with the DPRK. So they just keep changing the name of the company over and over and over and over and over. They just keep like shifting it slightly so that they're able to get around.
The Dutch are probably doing shit like that.
Probably,
too.
yeah.
And I also think it's just like to a certain extent that they have, like I said, they just have a lot of like diplomatic clout, where like a lot of
diplomatic immunity,
where a lot of like our allies like the Netherlands more than us anyway. So it's like, they're just like, no, we're not going to enforce that at all. Like, I mean, plus we're like in NATO, so like the rest of NATO is like, no, you can't tell the Netherlands what to do. And then we're like, oh, well, good, because we still need nukes next to Russia. So,
yeah.
But yeah, also, unfortunately, a lot of Cuba's future is, and I'm saying this currently, this can change, is like tied to Venezuela's destiny. And that's one of the things I worry about constantly, actually. Because like the more I like watch the situation there, I'm just like, if that government collapsed, like Cuba would have to go through another fuel crisis.
Well, so as of, we're recording this on September 14th. 2019,
the year of our Lord,
the year of our Lord, 2019. It seems like they're not out of the woods yet.
Sure,
but it seems like this particular coup attempt with Juan Guaido keeps not happening.
There was the fucking drone thing that failed.
Well, right, and that helped.
Yeah, the drone thing didn't work. The Guaido thing didn't work. The Maduro is now like arming militias.
Yeah.
Being like, we are going to defend ourselves.
I'm optimistic.
I am optimistic as well.
Like with how this last, like I was concerned
with
Brazil
though.
Well, I mean,
fucking Brazil.
Yeah, that's a big question mark. But like with the Venezuela, like just watching this recently, I feel optimistic that they managed to. I mean, part of it is just like how bumbling the U.S. empire has gotten at this point. They're just like,
I'm really like China needs to do some shit about this.
Yeah.
Like here I like
have. I mean,
even though I said I was a dingest earlier, I'm gonna be critical right now. Like if Xi Jinping, if you're listening, like you need to develop Venezuela's oil industry so that their economy can recover. That's literally all that it would take. I'm saying,
so you want them to do imperialism in a Latin American country? Wow. Right.
Yeah, I'm actually a social imperialist.
I mean, Putin of all people has sent like arms and intelligence
even though
officials
I hate
to
the
Venezuela.
Russian Federation.
Yeah, Russia sucks, but like
Putin Putin does a lot of stuff there. I'm
He
like,
does.
you know,
And
true.
What was that thing Hyder was saying?
Hyder
He
was saying Hyder was saying that he's a secret communist, and I was like, bro,
Oh, man.
Have you seen?
Hyder had a lot
There's this-
of takes like that.
I just saw this really great meme like a few days ago that it's like one of those political compasses or whatever, and Putin is in like every quadrant with like something.
well, because he's sent support to like Laos and to Venezuela and to Cuba, and so that's Hyder's argument, is that he's secretly like he's pretending to
What was
not
it like?
to be like a
anything you'd want in
Well,
like an
well,
it was like he's doing the
he's
things.
doing the things that,
And-
that people are like, why is it China doing this? Putin is doing it, which
It's like, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That's a tough.
that's a tough call.
argument.
But that's his
And
argument.
also, like, to be fair, he has to be president
Hyder,
of like
come
the
on, Proles
Russian
pod.
people, and they're like
Yeah.
reactionary as fuck. So
Not as bad as the Ukraine or Poland.
anybody who's a successful Eastern European politician for like more than a decade like has like my respect.
So, yeah, I guess. Do you have any? Is there anything else you want to like? You want to get in there? Anything else that's
let's
important
just
to
add
know?
like
Go
you
for
know,
it.
since we've already
Do
it's like too much to my surprise, we've actually like filled a lot more this time than I thought.
There's been fun stuff.
Let's just like add in some. This isn't necessarily like super technical stuff, but let's just like add in some cool stuff that I learned from like some
Oh yeah,
Cubans
do
or
it.
whatever.
Do it.
Like what's her name? That really old ass teacher I had that was like part of the literacy campaign when
Can't
she was
help
like
it.
a teenager. So she was dumb old. She had like a heart attack like while she was our teacher.
Jesus.
So it was like we only got her for like half the time. She didn't die.
But she
but
just wasn't teaching anymore.
Apparently she'd had like several strokes and heart attacks already,
Dang.
and like
And the
still
Cuban
didn't die.
healthcare system keeps you going.
Yeah, so yeah, she talked a lot about like the revolution and like the October crisis, and I feel like your listeners would want to hear about that. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, she talked about how like obviously we wanted to know about the missile crisis, like what that was like for them or whatever, and why is it called the October? Why did they call it the October crisis when we call it
the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, what she said is that there were so many other like crises with the U.S. happening during those few years that they couldn't just call it the U.S. like missile crisis.
Yeah.
It's like it was like, well, this is what happened in October, and she said like whenever we were like on the brink of nuclear war or whatever, and like the whole rest of the world was like, you know, getting into bunkers and was like terrified or whatever. She said they were, and like this is very much indicative of the Cuban spirit, is that they were all out like drinking in the streets and partying and dancing for like days because they
They're
were
like,
like, you know,
"Fuck
if
it."
it's the end of the world, like we.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, she said it was generally just like such euphoria, like in Cuba at the time, but like not the kind where it was like completely, you know, irresponsible, like pandemonium. It was like kind of like organized, like it. But I mean, because like it wasn't like the Russian Revolution at all. I mean, this is a Latin American country that has a completely different history than Eastern Europe. So it was like, you know, a lot of aspects of it are a lot different. I mean, like it was a lot more like leisurely than a lot of other like communist movements around the world. And she did speak about like the literacy program or whatever, and like how fulfilling that was. It's like, I mean, she said
she
like
was a teenager when she was doing
yeah,
that?
she was probably, I think like 14, maybe like 16 or something. Whenever she was going, I mean, she was going like, she said she went like all over rural Cuba, like into the mountains and stuff. It was just like teaching children and adults and like even old people how to read.
Yeah, one of the thing was like they
Um,
gave like everyone who was in 6th grade the entire year off or something like that.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
So that they could go
That
teach people
That
in the
is
mountains.
all, yeah,
and
that
the-
is
Oh, yeah.
all true. She literally did that. So
That's
it was
amazing.
like, and I mean, she said it was like kind of like, cause she lived in Havana. So she said she was kind of like astounded at just how many people in her country like could not read. Like,
Yeah.
in the countryside, it was like 80-90% of people just
Yeah.
couldn't read.
Yeah.
And then by the time it was over, it was like even more than in the United States.
Right. Yeah.
At that time, I don't know
Damn.
what the
I bet
More people
I'm willing to
definitely-
bet they're like
Cubans
percentage.
are more literate
I mean,
still
yeah.
than Americans.
absolutely.
I mean, even if all Americans can on a base level read, like it's
Yeah.
like,
but
past
which is
that,
not
it's
the
like,
case.
you know. Oh, I know. I knew people that were illiterate when I still lived in South Carolina,
Yeah,
aka
I
the
taught
corridor of
some
shame.
here in Colorado Springs. Like it's
I think I've heard you talk about that.
yeah. I think I mentioned it on an episode, but like yeah, absolutely.
I think she used to talk about like even now still like public transportation and a lot of other like services are like really cheap there. Like a lot of times when I rode the bus, like you didn't have to pay. and like you'd put you put like 5 cents in there or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah. And then like, you know, like, and she said like it used to be like all that shit used to be like completely free, and then like it was only like after like the 80s and stuff like that, a lot of that came back, and then like they used to be a lot more egalitarian too. Like there's a little bit of income inequality now because of like that, but they're like in the Constitution and like in their political debate right now, they're like discussing fixing that, and obviously they're like working with like other countries to get like invested into these industries or whatever, so that more people actually want to do those jobs again. Cause like one of the problems that they have today in Cuba is that it's so profitable to be like a taxi driver or like a bartender or like a waitress and stuff like that.
Connected
like
to the tourist industry.
Young people want to do that more than be like doctors and like, and they're trying to like balance that out, but you know, it's a complicated thing. I mean, it's really, but and then as far as like young Cubans are concerned, like they have a lot of interesting insights about their country. Because like on the one hand, like I said, they're like critical of it. They're not the same as like the old people where they all love Fidel. Like a lot of people, when I talked about Fidel, they like rolled their eyes or whatever. But like, because
cowards.
But the thing that I should say about that
sure it's because
they've
grown up with it.
Even constantly. The Cubans that weren't huge fans of Fidel, they all loved Che. I didn't meet anybody that didn't like Che. Even like one of the Cubans that I met that was probably the most critical. Like he said he hated socialism. He still had like a giant like Che portrait on his wall. and like he also had like one of like he had like an American dollar like under it or whatever. And yeah, this is kind of a cringy story, but it has a good ending in it. And I was like, well, what's that all about? And he's like, well, you know, that's like those are like he said our like in our household, like our two biggest idols. And it was like George Washington, and I think Jose Marti was like on there too, because they also really love him there. But then above all of that was Che Guevara.
Nice.
So they
he doesn't get a pass.
even like anti-communist Cubans love Che. And like when I say they like don't like Fidel, it's not like they're like, Fidel. It's just like they think aspects of it. He was like kind of an opportunist, and he was like not everybody's like that, and like they still obviously like prefer the revolution over like what they call the neocolonial period, which was from like Spain to then whatever like 60 years of that was, and they all fucking hate Batista too, so and they all make fun of the Miami Cubans and
well done,
and like, you know, they like rebuke a lot of the shit that they say or whatever. And then I just think everybody needs to know this part though, because it doesn't have anything to do with the historical or like technical stuff of Cuba, but it was just really cool that this happened to me. Is I actually met Raul Castro's granddaughter and like partied at her house a couple of times, and like went to like bars with her and her friends and shit. Cool. But the thing is, like, for half of the time we like didn't know who she was or whatever, and then like people like told us or whatever, and then after that I had to like pretend so hard that I didn't know, because I was like I can't. But it like made sense after like some of the conversations I had with her, because like we were talking about like cold weather and stuff, because a lot of Cubans like don't know what snow is and shit. And she was like, well, this one time I was in Siberia, and like it was like she was like talking about like being in China and like Siberia and like all these other places, and I was like, yeah, that was probably her.
But so like she wasn't benefiting from her status as or like that's what like she wasn't saying.
Maybe I mean like she had a nice house, but it wasn't like a sprawling like mansion or some shit like some politicians in like Latin America. It was just like kind of like a semi nice like suburban house, not any nicer than this. They had an above ground pool that was cool.
There's no above ground pool at the Proles house.
The Proles pad.
Damn.
There is a lack of grass in the front yard though. Just a dirt patch out there.
I'll have to see if she'll give us a donated remittance.
That'd be dope.
When President Xi ups his Patreon donation,
we'll put some sod down.
If he responds to my request.
No, if we want to take the inspiration of Cuba, we got to plant vegetables in the front yard.
True.
There you go.
Yeah,
Cool.
you better.
Well,
it's mandatory.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully. All right. So thank you so much to Nick for coming on tonight. Thanks so much to everybody for listening. We'll have some suggested reading in the show notes. It won't necessarily be like the paper you wrote, but like it'll be some stuff that you'll give us to. Like,
Well, I can send you my shit if you want to like post it. or
Oh, for
anything
sure.
like
Yeah,
that,
we
for
can
like
sure, for
additional
sure.
information, just in case
Yeah, that'd
people
be
want to
great.
know more
yeah, that'd
that
be
I
awesome.
maybe like forgot to cover in here. 'Cause
Sure,
there is
sure.
some really interesting shit that I forgot.
Yeah, no, I mean as many sources as you can. Like,
Okay.
the more the merrier. Cool. Yeah. So our sponsors are all of our excellent fans on Patreon, and as
To enable us to be petty bouge.
yeah, exactly. Still mad about it. Sorry, all right.
Idiots.
So as per usual, we have too many to read each time because I mean at this point it'd be like 45 minutes to
Oh,
just read
God.
names. But since the last time we recorded, these are the new ones. Last time, which was last week, so there's only a couple. Blast Beats and Bolsheviks, Colin, D, Gene, Jonathan, Joshua, Nick, Otto, Taylor, Third Pencil, and Tyler.
Third pencil.
Yeah,
That's the best one.
fuck the first two. All of these people are inspiring and revolutionary, and they make it easier for us to make this podcast for you and usually make it sound good because of our fancy recording equipment. We've established what we're calling the USSP with several child podcasts, and we've centralized the links to the various feeds on our website. You should check that out. There's some really dope ass stuff there. We want to thank Ransom Notes for our intro music. You can check them out on SoundCloud. And please don't forget to rate and review. Visit prolespod.com. Like us on facebook.com/prolespod. Follow us on twitter.com @prolespod.
What?
What? Twitter.com?
I don't know.
I live for
Whatever.
this. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or suggestions, keep them to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. Feel free to send us an email at prolespod@gmail.com. Someone sent us at our Proton mail, which like
Oh,
we haven't used
We
it
haven't
in a
used it
year.
I
forever.
answered them, but like we hadn't checked it since like May. Yeah. So
Ooh.
please send it to ProlesPod. We all check that very regularly. Or in the comment box on our website, which goes to our email, which we check regularly. So anyway, yeah. Thanks again, Nick, and thank you all for tuning in. Solidarity forever. And Fidel lives on in all of our hearts forever.
Hell yeah.
Bless.
Yo aprendí que la mayoría de las veces las cosas no son lo que parecen, que somos una especie que se especializa en mentir para así construir un porvenir con mentiras. Cuenta cuántas veces hacemos desaparecer con solo una frase lo que no quisiéramos perder. Se nos va la vida, estamos dejando correr el tren con el amor que solo pasa una vez. Yo aprendí a no burlarme de nadie con arrogancia, porque yo no sé cuáles serán mis circunstancias. Y la elegancia solo es cosa de ego, la ropa con la que mejor me veo es la del alma. Ya aprendí que la calma es buena consejera a la hora de tomar decisiones certeras. Que yo no soy la más lista, pero con el oportunista debo ser una fiera. Y yo sé que uno se puede equivocar como un ser humano normal, que tiene mucho valor que te perdonen, pero más perdonar que no se puede. Pisotear la palabra, pisotear la moral. El amor no basta cuando el respeto no alcanza. Es como arar en el mar. No soy mejor que nadie, nadie es mejor que yo. Aunque yo no entienda cómo todos quieren parecerse, como la gente se clona, pierde su propia voz y no saben hacia dónde caminar al levantarse. Yo aprendí que querer saber todo lo que piensan con respecto a mí, esa es mi amenaza. Es abrirle la puerta a la envidia, decirle cómo esta señora entra, está en su casa, que pasan las cosas, pero los errores pesan, porque luego se arrastran, porque luego te aplastan como cadenas del alma. Yo sé cómo se extraña a un hermano cuando te hace falta. Yo sé que a veces el que más sufre es el que más te ama. Yo sé que tendré otras madrugadas donde no tengo ni almohada. Ya yo comprendí que la vida es linda, pero no es un cuento de hadas. Yo sé que uno se puede equivocar como un ser humano normal, que tiene mucho valor que te perdonen, pero más perdonar que no se puede. Pisotear la palabra, pisotear la moral. El amor no basta cuando el respeto no alcanza. Es como